is up, everybody? It is the old 60 here for Sunday, and this is week 4 recap for college football. We're going to go through everybody and all the Power 5 schools, talk about what they did, and, kind of give a stock up, stock down report as far as I'm concerned, and how I did like yesterday, and also talk about the big games that are coming up for next week in week 5. So with that said, let's jump right into it. So I always start this live stream out with a stock up and stock down report, and really it's based off of the most recent things. So yesterday and the last couple weeks, in my opinion, stock up report is only got 4 teams this week, and that is Michigan, who is just quietly rolling. Yesterday. Shea Patterson had another big day. I think he went like 15 of 20 or something like that. It was something crazy. So he's really settled into this offense. The running game's there. The defense is obviously there. Now they didn't play a really powerful opponent. They had Nebraska yesterday, but it was a conference game and they did win big. Next up, talk about Texas Tech, who yesterday went to Oklahoma State and had a big road win. They seem to be quietly doing their thing as well. Texas yesterday gets a big win over TCU, and Kentucky is just rolling. They're still undefeated. They beat Mississippi State yesterday. That's 2 games this year. They're 2-0 in the conference, where they were completely, the underdog. One on the road, one at home against Florida and Mississippi State, and they beat both of them handedly and by multiple touchdowns, and they just keep doing their thing. Benny Snell this week said he was unstoppable, and he backed it up. I think he had 185 yards yesterday, taking on that defensive line for Mississippi State, which is really good. As far as stock down, I've only got 3 teams this week on here, and the first was Louisville. They only put up 3 points yesterday against Virginia. I know Bronco Mendenhall at Virginia has, that's his thing, is defense and run the ball, that kind of thing. But still, Louisville has, Petrino should be putting up a lot more points than this. Georgia Tech, this is kind of by default. I think the new rule this year with the cut blocks downfield have really hurt their offense. It's really pulled them back, and they just can't get anything really going. Yesterday they got blown out by Clemson. In the past, they have played Clemson very tough, and yesterday they just got blown out. I think that seems to be a trend that's starting with them. It don't look to be a very good year for them. And then Nebraska, and that's simply because they don't have a quarterback. I mean, Adrian Martinez played yesterday, but he's the only quarterback on scholarship. He's a freshman this year, so they've got problems. And I know a lot of people are already bailing on Scott Frost, and to me that's really premature. I think that they're going to be fine as the next year and the years to follow, but this year is going to be pretty rough for them. Now, with that stock up, stock down report done, let's talk about the games individually and go conference by conference. I always start out with the SEC, and we'll start out with the game with the number 1 team in the nation, and that is Alabama, obviously. And Texas A&M comes into Tuscaloosa. Alabama wins this thing 45-23. A&M's the first team to cover against Alabama, so that's the tide just keeps rolling. They did it in all the assets. In fact, they even hit a 47-yard field goal yesterday, and I don't know if you keep up with Alabama at all, but we have not been able to hit a field goal in forever, of any length, or we've missed a lot of chip shots. We just cannot get a kicker to do things. We finally hit a 47-yarder yesterday, so that was probably the biggest, high of the day as far as the stadium, as far as the sound level. There was more cheers for that field goal than even winning the game. It was crazy. But we'll move the camera over here, get a little closer to my stats and everything, where I'm not completely having to turn my head every time. But A&M looked good yesterday. Alabama had a lot of sacks against them, though. They did, so A&M's offensive line didn't do so well. Now, as far as the rest of the offense for A&M, they did. Kellen Mond is a total different quarterback than what he's been. Now, he did play Alabama pretty tough last year, That was a tough game for Alabama on the road, but he's completely changed even overall this year. He put up 98 yards rushing the ball yesterday on top of all his passing. Georgia yesterday started off the day. It was an early game against Missouri. Georgia rolls in there. We had the over 64.5, and it did go over. It went all the way to 72, so we covered that by a little more than a touchdown. Pretty good there. Let's see. LSU at home against La Tech. Nothing big here, but LSU gets another win. They're still undefeated, still rolling, still getting a little momentum. We'll see if they can keep it up. Auburn this week gets a win over Arkansas. This game actually was not as high scoring for Auburn as what most people would have thought. The line on this game was 30, and they did cover. They won by 34-3 was the final. But overall, Auburn was expected to come in this game and really blow out Arkansas at home, and that did not happen. Mississippi State last night, we talked about Kentucky earlier. Mississippi State goes on the road to Kentucky, was a 9.5 or in some spots a 10-point favorite. When I set the line, I had them at 9.5, so I didn't even touch the game. I'm glad I didn't because Kentucky actually, upset them, beat them by 3 touchdowns yesterday, 28-7. Kentucky's for real. I mean, I don't know how far this can carry. I was not big on Kentucky coming into the year. I thought they'd be, mediocre at best. They've really got something going. I was wrong earlier. I said Benny Snell had 185. He had 165 yards rushing. They really held Nick Fitzgerald down yesterday on defense. He only threw for 145 yards and didn't have a touchdown and threw an interception, though. Ole Miss yesterday did not look good at home. They did beat Kent State 38-17. Most of those points coming in the second half because they were tied up 7-7 going into halftime. This game got delayed a couple times for lightning and things, but overall, Ole Miss did not look good yesterday against Kent State. They do play LSU this coming up week, so maybe it was an overlooked game, but you would have thought after the way they played Alabama last week, they would have come out ready to, bounce back and have a little bit better day, and they didn't. South Carolina goes on the road to Vanderbilt. This, in my opinion, was one of those, sucker lines, because if you looked at South Carolina came into this game and was a 2-point favorite when it opened up. They did get some money on them. It did bump up to 2.5, and I don't know if it ever touched 3, but that was a very low line. Everybody was high on Vanderbilt, of course, for what they did last week against Notre Dame. South Carolina comes in there, scores 10 in each of the first 3 quarters, and scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter. They only allow 14 points by Vanderbilt. Both of those touchdowns scored in the second quarter. South Carolina gets a 37-14 win here and moves on. Now, the big rivalry game in the SEC yesterday was Florida and Tennessee. I actually thought that Tennessee would give them a little bit more. Dan Mullen was ready for this game. Obviously, he come out and they scored in every quarter and won this game 47-21. I had the over 46.5 here. And Florida scored that by themselves. 21 points from Tennessee definitely pushed it over to what we needed. But a big win, in my opinion, for Florida there. I know Tennessee's not a juggernaut by any means. They're not good, to be honest, but this is a rivalry game, and going on the road, getting that first SEC win for Dan Mullen as his tenure continues at Florida, this was big, and I may be overreacting to that, but I think it's going to be a big deal for him. I think it really helped him out. So that wraps up the SEC. We're starting to get into, everybody's getting into conference, and in fact, we had 24 Power 5 versus Power 5 games this week, and what that does is that, there's not as many games per conference every week now. In fact, in the Pac-12, which we're about to go over, there were only 4 games yesterday. They had a lot of teams off yesterday. So back on Friday night, Washington State and USC played, and this game opened up as a USC minus 3.5. I think it pushed all the way up to minus 5.5. USC does get the win, but Washington State covers. 39-36 is the final score there. and Washington State did not look bad in this game. They, especially at halftime, they had the lead at halftime, 24-17. Couldn't hold on to it. Gave up 15 in the fourth. But overall, Washington State looked a little bit better than I think a lot of people were expecting. Yesterday, we had a heartbreaker. We had Oregon plus a 2.5. Oregon this week started out as a 1.5 point favorite at home. Stanford got a lot of money on it, pushed all the way to them being a 2.5 point favorite. We took Oregon on the plus money and had a 24-7 lead in the in the third quarter. And Stanford gets some turnovers there. They get a 75-yard fumble recovery for a touchdown. Oregon still put up a touchdown in the fourth quarter to go up 31-21. They give up a late touchdown to Stanford. They get the ball back with like 3 minutes left. All they had to do was run the clock out. They fumble the ball. Stanford gets a field goal in the last few seconds. They go to overtime, and Stanford wins the thing 38-31. So that was a heartbreak loss for us there. That was one of those where you just scratch your head like, you guys really wasted a good opportunity. Now, I will say this. I've seen some video of after that game. It is not a good look for Oregon fans. They were throwing bottles and different things at Stanford players as they were leaving the field. That is not a good look. I know people get very passionate about these things, and I do too. This is the greatest sport that was ever created and ever has been played. But you can't do that. Like, you just can't. These are 18, 19, 20-year-old kids out there, man. You don't need to be throwing things at them. Guy had his shirt off and was standing 5 feet away from him. I tell you what, some of these Stanford players, they need a pat on the back for how they handled it, because this guy had, saluting them with both fingers and in their face, and not one of them that I seen on the video turned or said anything, did anything. They ran off the field, so very disciplined there. I know these kids from Stanford are very, very smart, but that was a good look for them, a bad look for Oregon fans. It was just an all-around bad deal. But either way, it was a heartbreaker for us, heartbreaker for Oregon fans, I know. Late night last night, we had Washington and Arizona State. Now, this game has the coolest stat I've seen in a while, or I guess I could say the craziest stat I've seen in a while, and that is, it continued last night. Coming into this game, the last 12 meetings between Arizona State and Washington, Arizona State was 12-0 against the spread. 12-0. Last night, guess what? They cover again. They only lose the game by 7. It finished 27-20. They were a 17, 17.5, even 18-point underdog on the road. They come out with a spread win and continue that streak, 13-0 the last 13 games. And the last game in the Pac-12 was Arizona and Oregon State. This game we had the under 75.5. We did hit it by quite a bit. Arizona did score in every quarter. They finished up winning the game 35-14. Oregon State scored in the fourth and the first and the fourth quarters, and we hit 49, which is well below the 75.5, which is good. That high of a total, obviously you're expecting a lot of points. Vegas is expecting it. The public's expecting it. The thing is just a few stops. You're in a good position to hit that. So a few 3-and-outs. Luckily, both teams had some of those and forced some of those, so that it really went our way. Let's see, that finishes up the Pac-12. If Coke wants to give me a little sponsorship, that'd be cool. But anyways, to the Big Ten. Several games here. Friday night we did have a game between Penn State and Illinois. Now this game, when I projected it, it kind of scared me. I completely stayed away from it because I was like, there's no way possible. And ended up it wouldn't have hit. But I had Illinois staying within the 28. And going into the fourth quarter, it was 28-24. Penn State, they just had taken the lead. at the end of the third quarter, and they exploded. Penn State scored 35 points in the fourth quarter, which took them well above, or above the spread. They covered, win the game 63-24. But everything looked good as far as the projections going into the fourth, and that's when Penn State just really took care of business like they should have. And that's why I stayed away from that game, because I thought, Penn State, there's no way. Didn't really think about the fact that they were overlooking Illinois for they got Ohio State this coming up week, which will be the game day game, I heard. So obviously it's a wide out. It's going to be a huge game. There was definitely potential for them to overlook Illinois, but they come out in the fourth quarter and finally woke up after playing, 45 minutes of football. Yesterday, Ohio State played Tulane. It was the first time that Urban Meyer's been back on the sideline. He's been able to coach the last couple of weeks, just couldn't go to the game. Back on the sideline, they cover the spread and win 49-6 over Tulane. Not a big deal there. Tulane's 1-3, lost to UAB last week. Not a huge victory there. Let's see, Wisconsin and Iowa last night. We finally got lucky on a game. This was it. We had over 43.5. At halftime, it was 7-7, which is, I know that seemed very low, but that just meant we had to have 30 points in the second half. And I know that, at a 7-7 game, you're thinking, well, that's pretty tough, and it was. They come out in the third quarter, scored 17 between the two. We're looking really good. We just need 2 touchdowns in the final quarter, and nothing. Could not do anything. Went 3 and out, back and forth, and then finally, with a minute left, Wisconsin scores a touchdown. And I'm thinking, well, we're going to miss this one by 5.5 points or so. They get the ball back on an interception on Iowa's 40, and running the clock out with 22 seconds left, the guy breaks it, runs down the sideline, scores a touchdown, and sends us over. So that was pure luck, in my opinion, to get those points right there. Two touchdowns in the final minute of the game, but I'll take it. That has went against us so many times. It's finally good to get one going with us. Nebraska and Michigan, we talked about that earlier in the stock up report and stock down report, but Michigan to me is really starting to get it going. Shea Patterson went 15-22. Now, he didn't throw for a ton of yards, 120 yards. But if it's 120 yards that are efficient and doing what you need to do without turning the ball over, that's a pretty good day, in my opinion. I know that's not a huge stat day, but 15-22 is a huge stat day. Karan Higdon, their running back, had 12 carries for 136 yards, so a huge day for him. He broke a couple of those long runs. And Nebraska just falls to 0-3, 0-1 in the Big Ten. They were down 39-0 at halftime and scored 10 in the second half, but Michigan scores 56, gets a win 56-10. Yesterday, this next game was I guess I've heard the term smelly fish. It was that type of line, and that was Boston College and Purdue. Boston College was a 6.5-point favorite, and that line, if you think about what BC has done versus what Purdue has done, that line should have been 2 touchdowns, probably around 13 or 14 points. So it was like you kind of looked at the line, you're thinking, this is too good to be true. And that's really why I passed on that game. Now, I did project Boston College. I think I projected them around 7.5, so I was only a point away from it. And I stayed away because I don't like taking something I'm that close to the line. Once again, just like the Mississippi State line, thankfully I didn't touch it because Boston College comes in there and loses this game 30-13. And Purdue holds A.J. Dillon to 59 yards total on 19 carries. They really shut him down, and they get the win at home, their first victory of the year. Like I said, that line, if it looks too good to be true, a lot of times it is. And really, that we've been talking about this just in the last few minutes, there's been 3 of these games. South Carolina looked too good to be true. Or, if you're looking at Vanderbilt and you're like, man, they've really set this to where they think Vanderbilt's going to win. It's not always true. Sometimes they know, they predict how the game's going to come in as far as money on each side, and they adjust to that. That's exactly what they did in that South Carolina Vanderbilt game. They knew how South Carolina looked against Georgia, how the public perceived how they looked against how Vanderbilt looked against Notre Dame. That line was set for a reason there. South Carolina comes in, who is the better team, takes care of business. As far as this Purdue and Boston College game, I don't know how they, exactly. It was just you had a 3-0 team coming in against a team who hasn't won, is pissed off, ready to win a game, and that's exactly what they did. At home, that's just one of those games that you love to stay away from. Luckily, we did, and for good reason. Now, next up after that, Michigan State, Indiana. Michigan State was a 5.5 point favorite in this game, and it looked like it was going to fall right on that. Late in the fourth quarter, they break a long run. I think it was like 70 yards and score a touchdown to make it 35-21. That's where it finished. Michigan State on the road gets the win. But that line, it looked like it was going to be finished up 28-21 for a while. Buffalo goes in as a 6.5 point favorite and beats Rutgers 42-13. That's absolutely ridiculous that Rutgers, that's a Big Ten school at home, losing 42-13 against Buffalo. There's not a lot to be said here. Rutgers falls to 1-3 on the year. Maryland and Minnesota, thought this was going to be a very good game. Maryland comes in and takes care of business. They scored every single quarter. They win 42-13. They were, I believe, around a 2-point favorite going into the game at home, and they dominated Minnesota. They only allowed 13 points against PJ Fleck's team. That's really good, and they get the win at home. That wraps up the Big Ten. Moving to the Big 12. Last night, I know there was a game that, unless you were an Oklahoma fan, you were pulling against them. Army really played well against Oklahoma last night. Took them to overtime and ended up losing the game. Oklahoma gets the win 28-21. Oklahoma definitely overlooked Army in this game. There's no doubt about it. And Army almost slipped up and got them. Kansas State and West Virginia, we had the under in this game. I believe it was 54. Kansas State was a 16-point road dog. West Virginia covers at home, but they win 35-6, totaling 41 and giving us our under win, which was a really good thing there. Usually the past, I would say 5 or 6 years, this game has been, or I guess ever since West Virginia came in the league, this has been a closer game and been a high-scoring game a lot of times, a lot of those years. So this was a big win by West Virginia. They look good. Will Greer was 25-35. That's a very good percentage. Very good. For 356 yards and 5 touchdowns. So that's a huge day from a quarterback. He still has Heisman hopes, and against the Kansas State defense, anytime you beat Kansas State like that, you've done pretty well. So it doesn't matter how good Kansas State is. They're always well coached, and they're going to be prepared for the game. It's just, is their talent level at the level it needs to be for their opponent. And West Virginia took care of business. I guess a big upset yesterday was Texas Tech on the road against Oklahoma State. Talked about Texas Tech in the stock up report. They get a 41-17 win at Oklahoma State. They held Oklahoma State scoreless in the second half. This kid for Texas Tech, who set their freshman record, or I think the Big 12's freshman record last week with passing yards, backs it up going 35 of 46 for 397 yards. This Oklahoma State defense, this is a team that their defense is better in my opinion. They didn't show it yesterday. They've got a really good coordinator that they stole from Duke, and who's been with David Cutcliffe for a while. And their defense has been playing a lot better this year. And then yesterday they run into that buzzsaw of Texas Tech, and it seems that Tech just went off on them, which Oklahoma State was a 14 to 14.5 point favorite at home yesterday, so a big upset as far as the spread goes. Texas and TCU. I like Texas in this game. I didn't take them, but on a little pick 'em that we do, I did take Texas plus the points. They did get a home victory against TCU. They broke that streak of, I believe it was 4 years in a row TCU has beat Texas. They win by 2 touchdowns. Actually win by 15. 31-16 was the final. Texas is now 3-1, 1-0 in the Big 12. TCU falls to 2-2. TCU was ranked in this game 17th. Texas was not. So this was a, very small spread, but an upset at home. Herman continues his underdog role. I mean, when Tom Herman, one of his teams is an underdog, look for them to play well. They do very good playing as an underdog. Iowa State yesterday wins 26-13 over Akron. I know that's only a 13-point victory, but Akron went into Northwestern, beat them. I don't know for sure, but would have definitely played Nebraska very good on that first week if they wouldn't have got rained out. But Akron is not a bad team. Terry Bowden's a coach up there. If you know who that is, he's Bobby Bowden's son. Coached at Auburn in the 90s to an undefeated season. I believe it was like 93. So he's been around the block a few times. Not a bad coach. Had a little bad luck up there. There's not a lot of good talent once everybody robs Ohio. Once Michigan gets a lot of their players from the state of Ohio. Ohio State gets a lot of their players from there. You've got all these Big Ten schools ripping up all the talent. So a team like Akron and the MAC doesn't get a ton of talent left over, but they got enough. They're playing well this year. We'll see what they can do in the MAC. Baylor wins at home 26-7. Now this was a side that I was off on. I had Kansas. I was riding the hot hand. They won 2 in a row. Put up 400 yards rushing last week against Rutgers, and I thought that they could come in this week, even though I didn't think they would put up near that. I thought they could establish a run and try to control the clock. They just couldn't get anything going. Baylor scored all of their points in the first 3 quarters. Baylor wins this thing 26-7. Puts Kansas at 2-2. Baylor is now 3-1. Their only loss coming last week at Duke. So look for them to. They're a lot better than they were last year. Obviously, before the season, I had them going 6-6, making it to a bowl game, but barely. It definitely looks like it's in reach to me. They're a solid team. They've still got a long way to go, but they're definitely playing a lot better than what they were. That wraps up the Big 12. Finally, we're down to the ACC. Yesterday, Clemson goes to Georgia Tech, wins 49-21. Clemson was, I believe, a 16.5-point favorite in that game. Georgia Tech, over the last few years, has really played them close and gave them some scares here and there, but not yesterday. Like I was talking about in the Stockdown report, that new rule, the new cut rule, where you can't cut a player more than 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, has really hurt this offense. It's really put, a strain on what Georgia Tech can do. Notre Dame yesterday switches up quarterbacks. Ian Book, I don't know how he pronounces that. I didn't get to watch this game, but he came in, threw for 325 yards, went 25 of 34. Very good day there. 2 touchdowns. I think he rushed for a touchdown maybe. They get a 56-27 win at Wake Forest. That was Wake Forest doesn't have the best defense, but at the same time, to switch up quarterbacks like that and come in and get a win like that should give them some momentum going into Stanford next week. This is kind of what we expected from Notre Dame coming into the year. They finally played like it. We'll see if they keep him. I think they'll probably keep him in there instead of Wimbush for the next 2 weeks at least. Yesterday, Old Dominion upsets Virginia Tech. Not a good look for Virginia Tech. They were tied up 35-35 and let Old Dominion score 28 points in the 4th quarter. That's just, I believe I heard this was the most yards given up by now I can't think of his name, the defensive coordinator at Virginia Tech, Bud Foster. The most points most yards or anything he has ever given up while at Virginia Tech, and he's been at Virginia Tech for like 20 years. So this was a bad deal for VT yesterday. Miami wins at home against Florida International 31-17. this is, Butch Jones is coaching at Florida International. If you remember, he was at Miami in the late 90s. He then went to the pros, went to the Cleveland Browns, and ever since then he come back, went to North Carolina, got in a little trouble up there with academics and things. But he's done well at Florida International, and they're now 2-2. This seems to be his wheelhouse, being down in South Florida. This is his area, so he'll probably continue, I would think, to have success there. Miami moves to 3-1 with this win, and they look to start ACC play coming up. Purdue, we talked about getting that win over Boston College. North Carolina gets a win over Pittsburgh. North Carolina yesterday wins 38-35. I didn't get to see a lot about this game, so I don't know what to talk about there, but UNC gets a win. They did have, last week off because of the storm, so they definitely had a little extra time to prepare, and they took advantage of it and get the win. That is their first win of the year. Louisville only scores 3 against Virginia. Virginia wins 27-3. Virginia is now 3-1, so they're looking to have a decent year. We'll see if they can keep it up. I like Bronco Mendenhall, but he came into a school that doesn't have a lot of talent, who is fighting a lot of conference teams for players in the area. And so if he can get anything built there, he's really done a really good job. Duke yesterday wins 55-13 over North Carolina State. Nothing huge there. They should be winning that kind of, scoring those kind of points against a team like North Carolina Central. Excuse me, not North Carolina State. North Carolina Central. If they scored that many against North Carolina State, they've really did big. Florida State wins 37-19 over Northern Illinois. This was a big win. Northern Illinois is not a bad team. They've, held, I believe they played Utah earlier in the season, only lost by 10. And they've traditionally been a really good team. They actually came to Tuscaloosa one time, I remember, back in the early 2000s and beat us. So this is, traditionally that's a team that doesn't care who they're playing. They're like Fresno State. They don't care who they're playing. They play anybody, anywhere, anytime. Syracuse wins over UConn 51-21. UConn is terrible. They do have a win this year, which is unbelievable. But Syracuse goes to 4-0. Dino's got it going up there. And I think he's a really good coach. He's done really good at Syracuse. That's a tough place to win. It's got a lot of tradition, a lot of, streak of Heisman winners. But overall, that's a tough place to play and get players to come into Syracuse, New York. But he's got it rolling. He's got them guys believing in him, and I look for them to have a pretty good year this year. Nothing huge, but a solid year for Syracuse. And then North Carolina State wins over Marshall 37-20. Both of these teams were off last week with the storm, so this was a solid win, I guess you could say, over Marshall. Marshall was 2-0 coming in the game, so they're not bad. Ryan Finley was 23-40 for 377 yards and 1 touchdown. Pretty good day there. They are really relying on him a lot, though. If anybody this season shuts him down and really slows him down, they are going to be in trouble. North Carolina State is 3-0, but I'm telling you, if they have a very non-existent rushing game. Now, yesterday they did rush for 81 yards, or a little more than that. Their best player rushed for 81 yards. But overall, it's not, they can't rely on their rush to win a game. They're going to rely on Ryan Finley for the whole thing. Now, that wraps up all the team-to-team. Yesterday, finally had a good day, went 7-3. So I think I'm going to continue to do the volume plays instead of really focusing in on some. And what was happening there in the first 3 weeks was I project everything. I would get my projections out for every game, and then I would focus in on some. I was putting too much feel on the ones I was focusing on instead of going off the number like I should have been. I was putting way too much into coming up with my own reasons of why something should happen. For instance, last week with Auburn, when I projected it, I had Auburn winning by 8. Now, of course, that didn't happen. They did lose the game outright. But what I'm saying is that would have been leaning towards LSU taking the number. Don't don't look at Auburn. Well, I went into it thinking, well, I know that I've got them by 8. I'm gonna put a little feel on it, and I think they'll win by 2 touchdowns. What happens? They lose 23 or 22-21 at home. So, I took that out this week. I actually did a lot better. Went strictly off the number and went off some trends and things like that, and just went with it and went 7-3. So very happy with that. Going to be changing it up this week one more time, similar to what I did last week. We'll continue with the volume plays. I actually got somebody that has been wanting to join in on the videos, has been wanting to have content put up for a long time. So we've got together. We're going to be Skyping and really putting that video out on Wednesday. I think the way we're going to do it is 7 plays each. Really a kind of a rapid fire thing. It's going to bounce back and forth. It's going to be around a 15-minute video again, but it'll be like 30 seconds for each person to tell what game they like, why they like it, and move on. And it'll be 7 plays for each. And what I'll do is I'll document those, and we'll see, how we do, and kind of keep up a running tally. So it should be a little more fun as far as it ain't just me talking straight to the camera. It'll be more of a conversation, more of like a little competition there, I guess you could say, between the two of us as far as the 7 best plays we have. With that said, that's all there as far as week 4. Big games coming up next week. There's 25 Power 5 matchups. So 50 total teams out of the 65 that we keep up with going in, playing each other. So we're really hitting the conference time of the year. Should be getting very good. The biggest games, we've got 7 games of those that I really felt like were huge games, and that is Florida, Mississippi State, just for Mullen. I know Mississippi State got upset yesterday on the road. Florida looked good. This is where he left from to go to Florida, so this should be a good game. South Carolina, Kentucky. I think that's 2 really good East teams playing. Stanford, Notre Dame, that should be obvious. That's a traditional rivalry game. And both of those teams coming to that game, undefeated and ready to go. Utah and Washington State, that should be a good game there. Ohio State, Penn State, we already talked about that. That is the game day game this week, so it's always good when they go to Penn State to see that game. West Virginia, Texas Tech, should be a high-scoring game there. And Syracuse, Clemson. Now, I think Clemson's going to have some revenge this year. Syracuse beat them last year on a Friday. I don't see Syracuse getting this win, but I do think it's 2 undefeated teams, so it should be a good game. As far as the rest of them, we got Tennessee, Georgia, Arkansas, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, LSU, Oregon, Cal, Oregon State, Arizona State, USC, Arizona, UCLA, Colorado, Indiana, Rutgers, Michigan, Northwestern, Purdue, Nebraska, Baylor, Oklahoma, Iowa State, TCU, Oklahoma State, Kansas, Texas, and Kansas State, Florida State, and Louisville, Virginia, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, Duke, and North Carolina and Miami. So that's everything for next week. Of course, I'll be back, like I said, on Wednesday. We'll have a video up and ready to go. It's going to look a little bit different. It's going to be 2 of us on there instead of just 1. But should be a lot of fun. Hopefully it bring a little more energy to it. And we'll see what happens. Hope you have a great Sunday in the first half of your week. And I will see you Wednesday, See you Wednesday night. Thanks for watching.